The gunshot echoed across the parched Nevada landscape as Dahlia Locke sprinted through the desert scrubland, her heart pounding harder than the hoofbeats of the horse she'd abandoned half a mile back. The year was 1873, and her life had become a desperate race against a man who once claimed to love her but now wanted only to see her dead. "You can't run forever, Dahlia," Victor Harmon's voice carried on the dry wind. "This territory ain't big enough for both of us to live in." Dahlia knew he meant every word. 3 weeks ago, she'd finally gathered the courage to leave him after enduring months of his violent outbursts and controlling ways. She'd slipped away in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the meager savings she'd managed to hide. But Victor, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory, had sworn that if he couldn't have her, no one would. The distant silhouette of Pyramid City shimmered in the afternoon heat. Sanctuary seemed so close yet impossibly far as Dahlia's legs trembled with exhaustion. Her once fine dress was torn and dusty, her dark hair falling loose from its pins. Another shot kicked up dirt just feet from where she ran. "Next one won't miss, darlin'," Victor called, the cruel edge in his voice unmistakable. Tears stung Dahlia's eyes as she pushed herself forward. At 24, she refused to believe this was how her life would end, gunned down by a man she'd once trusted with her heart. The distant buildings of Pyramid City grew larger, her only hope for survival. As she neared the outskirts of town, Dahlia risked a glance over her shoulder. Victor was closing in, his expensive black stallion eating up the distance between them. His handsome face was twisted with rage, his gun aimed squarely at her back. Dahlia stumbled into the main street, drawing startled looks from townsfolk going about their afternoon business. She wanted to scream for help, but her throat was parched, her breath coming in desperate gasps. "Stop right there, Dahlia," Victor's voice boomed as he rode into town, pulling his horse to a halt 20 yards behind her. People scattered, clearing the street as they recognized the dangerous scene unfolding before them. Dahlia froze, her legs finally giving out as she fell to her knees in the dusty street. This was it. She closed her eyes, waiting for the fatal shot. Instead, she heard the creak of leather and the jingle of spurs as someone stepped into the space between her and Victor. Not anymore. The voice was deep, steady, and unfamiliar. Dahlia opened her eyes to see a tall figure standing protectively before her. Broad-shouldered and straight-backed, the man faced Victor with his hand resting casually on the holstered revolver at his hip. "This ain't your business, stranger," Victor snarled, his gun still aimed but now finding a new obstacle in its path. "You're making it my business by threatening a woman in the middle of this street," the stranger replied calmly. "Now, why don't you holster that weapon before someone gets hurt?" Dahlia stared up at her unexpected defender. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the firm set of his jaw and the quiet confidence in his stance. A badge glinted on his vest, the silver star of a U.S. Marshal. "You know who I am?" Victor demanded, his voice rising. "I'm Victor Harmon. I own half the land between here and Carson City. And I'm Isaac Quinn, U.S. Marshal," the stranger replied evenly. "And right now, you're breaking about half a dozen laws I'm sworn to uphold." Dahlia watched as Victor's face contorted with rage. For a moment, she was certain he would shoot anyway, consequences be damned. But something in Marshal Quinn's unwavering stance made him hesitate. "She's my woman," Victor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "She ran off and I'm taking her back." "Looks to me like she doesn't want to go," Marshal Quinn observed. "And in these United States, a woman isn't property to be claimed." A small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, watching the confrontation with wary fascination. Dahlia remained frozen on her knees, scarcely daring to breathe. "This isn't over," Victor finally said, slowly lowering his gun. Not by a long shot. His eyes found Dahlia's, filled with a promise of vengeance. "I'll be seeing you real soon, darlin'." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped out of town, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Only when he was well out of sight did Marshal Quinn turn to Dahlia, extending a hand to help her up. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin, and for the first time, she noticed the network of small scars along his jawline, souvenirs of a life lived dangerously. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Dahlia shook her head, though in truth every part of her ached. "No," she managed. "Thank you, Marshal." "You're safe for now," he said, looking in the direction Victor had disappeared. "But a man like that doesn't give up easily." "I know," Dahlia whispered, fear welling up inside her again. "I know better than anyone." Marshal Quinn studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You'd better come with me to my office. We need to talk about what happens next." As he guided her down the street toward the marshal's office, Dahlia felt the curious stares of the townspeople. She was a stranger here, bringing trouble to their doorstep. And yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than terror. She felt the faintest glimmer of hope. The marshal's office was a simple wooden structure on Pyramid City's Main Street. Inside, the space was orderly and spare: a desk and chair, a gun rack on the wall, a small stove in the corner, and 2 cells in the back, both currently empty. Marshal Quinn guided Dahlia to a chair before pouring water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Drink," he said, handing it to her. Slowly. Dahlia accepted gratefully, her hand still trembling slightly. The cool water soothed her parched throat. "Now," Marshal Quinn said, settling behind his desk, "perhaps you'd better tell me who you are and why Victor Harmon is hunting you like a wounded animal." Dahlia lowered the cup. "My name is Dahlia Locke. I came to Nevada from Boston 2 years ago to teach at the school in Silver Springs." "That's about 40 miles east of here," the marshal noted. "Yes, I met Victor 6 months after I arrived. He seemed charming at first, cultured despite being a rancher. He'd traveled, read books. He courted me properly." Dahlia's voice faltered. "My parents died before I came west. I was alone, and his attention was flattering." Marshal Quinn nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "We became engaged 3 months ago, and I moved to his ranch. That's when everything changed." Dahlia stared down at her hands. "He became possessive, jealous of every man who so much as looked in my direction. Then came the drinking, and with it the violence." "He hit you?" The marshal's voice had a dangerous edge to it now. "Yes," Dahlia admitted quietly. "The first time he wept afterward, swore it would never happen again. I believed him. But there was a second time and a third, each worse than the last. So you ran." "3 weeks ago. I waited until he left for Carson City on business. I took what little money I had saved and fled. I've been moving from town to town ever since, but somehow he keeps finding me." Dahlia looked up, meeting the marshal's eyes. "Today he wasn't trying to bring me back. He was trying to kill me." Marshal Quinn leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "Miss Locke, I've seen men like Victor Harmon before. Men who believe their wealth and power put them above the law. Men who think women are possessions to be controlled." "Can you arrest him?" Dahlia asked, hope flaring briefly. The marshal's expression turned grim. "For what happened today, yes. Firing a weapon within city limits, threatening a citizen, those are charges I can make stick. But they won't hold him for long, not with his money and connections." Dahlia's heart sank. "Then what am I to do? He won't stop until he finds me. For now, you need a safe place to stay." Marshal Quinn stood up. "There's a boarding house run by Mrs. Reynolds at the edge of town. Good woman, discreet, I'll take you there. And then what? Dahlia asked, rising from her chair. The marshal reached for his hat. And then I send some telegrams. Victor Harmon may have influence in these parts, but he's not above federal law. If what you say is true, and I believe it is, then we might be able to build a stronger case against him. As they stepped back onto the street, Dahlia was acutely aware of eyes following them. Word of the confrontation had spread quickly through the small town. "Keep your head up," Marshal Quinn said quietly. "These people respect strength." Dahlia straightened her shoulders, though it took considerable effort. The boarding house was a two-story building painted a faded blue, with a small garden out front trying valiantly to survive in the desert heat. Mrs. Reynolds proved to be a stern-faced woman of about 60, with sharp eyes that took in Dahlia's bedraggled appearance without comment. "She needs a room, Helen," the marshal explained, discreetly. "Trouble?" Mrs. Reynolds asked. "Not of her making," he replied. The older woman nodded once. "Second floor, last room on the left, has its own entrance from the back stairs. No one will bother you there." "Thank you," Dahlia said, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. "I'll have a bath sent up and some fresh clothes," Mrs. Reynolds added, her expression softening slightly. "You look like you could use both." After the older woman departed to make arrangements, Dahlia turned to Marshal Quinn. "I have very little money left," she admitted. "I don't know how long I can. Don't worry about that for now," he interrupted gently. "Mrs. Reynolds and I have an understanding when it comes to people in need of shelter." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't the first time he'd brought someone in danger to the boarding house. "Why are you helping me?" Dahlia asked suddenly. "You don't know me." Marshal Quinn was quiet for a moment. "My sister was married to a man not unlike your Victor," he finally said. "I was away fighting in the war when it happened. By the time I returned, she was already buried." The simple statement, delivered without emotion, struck Dahlia to her core. "I'm sorry." "Get some rest, Miss Locke," he said, setting his hat back on his head. "I'll check on you in the morning." After he left, Mrs. Reynolds returned with two young girls carrying a copper tub and buckets of steaming water. They set up the bath behind a screen in the corner of the small but clean room, and Mrs. Reynolds laid out a simple dress, undergarments, and a nightgown on the bed. "These belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Sacramento," she explained. "They should fit well enough." "You're very kind," Dahlia said. "Kind has nothing to do with it," the older woman replied briskly. "Any woman who's had the courage to leave a bad situation deserves a helping hand." She moved to the door. "Supper's at 6, but I can have a tray brought up if you'd prefer not to join the other boarders." "I think I'd rather stay here tonight," Dahlia admitted. Mrs. Reynolds nodded. "Wise. There'll be time enough for socializing when you're feeling stronger." Left alone, Dahlia sank gratefully into the bath, letting the warm water soothe her aching body. As she washed away the dust and grime of her desperate flight, she found herself thinking of Marshal Quinn and the quiet strength he exuded. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel something beyond fear, a cautious sense of security, however temporary it might prove to be, because deep down, Dahlia knew that Victor would never give up. He would return, and when he did, not even a U.S. Marshal might be able to stop him. The next morning dawned clear and hot, typical for late summer in Nevada. Dahlia awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed in the borrowed clothes, grateful for their clean simplicity, and ventured downstairs to find Mrs. Reynolds in the kitchen. "There you are," the older woman said, looking up from the dough she was kneading. "Feeling better after a proper rest?" "Much, thank you," Dahlia replied, though in truth, Her sleep had been haunted by nightmares of Victor finding her. Marshal Quinn stopped by early, said to tell you he'd return around noon. Mrs. Reynolds nodded toward the stove. Coffee's hot, and there's porridge keeping warm if you're hungry. Dahlia gratefully accepted both, surprised to find her appetite had returned. As she ate, a young girl of about 7 or 8 wandered into the kitchen, regarding Dahlia with frank curiosity. "That's my granddaughter, Ellie," Mrs. Reynolds explained. "My son's child. He and his wife are both gone now. Influenza took them 3 years back." "I'm sorry," Dahlia said, understanding the loss all too well. Ellie continued to stare at Dahlia. "Are you hiding from someone?" she asked bluntly. "Eleanor," Mrs. Reynolds scolded, "mind your manners." "It's all right," Dahlia assured her, then turned to the child. "In a way I am. Sometimes people need a safe place for a while." Ellie nodded solemnly. "Like when I hide from Johnny Peterson because he pulls my braids." Despite everything, Dahlia found herself smiling. "Something like that, yes. If he comes here, I'll hit him with Grandma's rolling pin," Ellie declared, earning another exasperated "Eleanor" from Mrs. Reynolds. "I think the Marshal will handle that part," Dahlia said gently. "But thank you for the offer." After breakfast, Dahlia helped Mrs. Reynolds with the dishes, grateful for the simple normality of the task. By mid-morning, she felt restless enough to venture out to the small porch, where she sat in a rocking chair, watching the dusty street and the occasional passerby. Pyramid City was smaller than Silver Springs, with perhaps a few hundred inhabitants. From her vantage point, Dahlia could see the general store, a saloon, the Marshal's office, and what appeared to be a small church at the far end of town. The desert stretched out beyond the buildings, harsh and beautiful in its vastness. "Penny for your thoughts," a familiar voice said, startling her from her reverie. Dahlia looked up to find Marshal Quinn standing at the bottom of the porch steps, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "I was just thinking how peaceful it seems," she admitted. "Hard to believe that yesterday." "Yesterday is behind us," he said firmly, climbing the steps to join her. "It's today and tomorrow we need to concern ourselves with." "Have you learned anything?" Dahlia asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. The Marshal nodded. "Harmon's been spotted at his ranch. Seems he's licking his wounds for now, but I doubt that will last." "So he's still close," Dahlia whispered. "Yes, but he's also being watched. I've deputized a couple of reliable men to keep an eye on his movements." Marshal Quinn hesitated. "I've also received replies to my telegrams." Something in his tone made Dahlia's stomach tighten. "Bad news." "Not entirely. There's a federal judge arriving in Carson City next week. He's willing to hear your case against Harmon." "But that's good, isn't it?" Dahlia asked, confused by his grim expression. "It would be, except for 2 things. First, you'd need to appear in person to testify." "I can do that," Dahlia said, though the thought of facing Victor in a courtroom filled her with dread. "Second," the Marshal continued, "Harmon has friends in high places, the territorial governor among them. There's a risk that even with your testimony the judge might be influenced." Dahlia felt her brief hope deflating. "Then what's the point?" "The point, Miss Locke, is that we try. Justice doesn't always come easily, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting for it." The Marshal's blue eyes held her steadily. "I've seen too many people give up because the odds seemed against them. I won't let that happen to you." The conviction in his voice stirred something inside Dahlia, a flicker of the determination that had once brought her west to forge a new life on her own terms. "What do we do in the meantime?" she asked. "We prepare. And you stay safe." Marshal Quinn leaned against the porch railing. "I'd like to introduce you to my deputy, Sam Thornton. Good man, steady in a fight. He'll keep watch when I can't be here." "You think Victor will come to the boarding house?" Dahlia asked, her alarm rising. I think we should be prepared for any possibility, the Marshal replied carefully. Harmon strikes me as a man used to getting what he wants. Men like that don't respond well to being denied. Dahlia knew this all too well. She had the bruises to prove it, though they were fading now. What if? She began, then hesitated. Go on, Marshal Quinn encouraged. What if I just left, kept running? There must be places far enough away that he couldn't find me. The Marshal shook his head. Running doesn't solve the problem, it just postpones it. And a man with Harmon's resources could track you halfway across the country if he was determined enough. Then I'm trapped, Dahlia said, despair creeping into her voice. Not trapped, Marshal Quinn corrected her. Protected. There's a difference. He straightened up. Now, if you're feeling up to it, I thought you might like to see a bit more of Pyramid City. Small as it is, it's home to some good people. The invitation surprised her. You think it's safe for me to be seen in town? Hiding away only feeds fear, he said. Besides, the more people who know you, the more eyes watching out for trouble. The logic made sense, though Dahlia couldn't help the anxiety that gripped her at the thought of being out in the open. Still, she nodded. I'd like that. They walked slowly down the main street, Marshal Quinn pointing out landmarks and introducing her to townsfolk they encountered. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, offered a friendly nod. The blacksmith, a mountain of a man named Miller, tipped his hat respectfully. Several women coming out of the millinery shop exchanged curious glances but greeted her politely enough. News travels fast in a small town, Marshal Quinn explained wryly. Everyone knows something happened yesterday, though the details might be somewhat exaggerated by now. What are they saying? Dahlia asked. Last I heard, I single-handedly fought off a gang of 10 outlaws to rescue a kidnapped heiress, he replied with a rare smile that transformed his serious face. Despite everything, Dahlia found herself laughing. Only 10. I'm disappointed, Marshal. Isaac, he said unexpectedly. When we're not dealing with official business, I'd be honored if you'd call me Isaac. The informality surprised her, but Dahlia nodded. Isaac then, and I'm Dahlia. They continued their walk, eventually reaching the small church at the edge of town. Unlike the other wooden buildings, it was constructed of adobe, with a simple bell tower and wooden cross. Father Martinez holds services here every Sunday, Isaac explained. He also runs a small mission for the local Paiute. You mentioned preparation earlier, Dahlia said, turning to face him. What did you mean by that? Isaac's expression grew serious again. I want to teach you how to defend yourself. The statement shocked her. You mean with a gun? Eventually, perhaps. But there are other ways a woman can protect herself from a man who means her harm. He hesitated. I understand if the idea makes you uncomfortable. No, Dahlia interrupted, surprised by her own vehemence. No, I want to learn. I'm tired of being afraid, of feeling helpless. Something like approval flashed in Isaac's eyes. Good. We'll start tomorrow. As they turned back toward the boarding house, Dahlia spotted a rider approaching town from the east, a young man on a lathered horse, pushing the animal hard. Isaac noticed too, his posture immediately alert. Stay here, he instructed, striding toward the oncoming rider. The young man pulled his horse to a skidding stop before the Marshal, leaning down to speak urgently. Though Dahlia couldn't hear the words, she saw Isaac's expression darken. After a brief exchange, the rider wheeled around and galloped back in the direction he'd come from. Isaac returned to Dahlia, his face grim. That was one of my deputies. Harmon's gathered some men, ranch hands, and a few hired guns. They were seen riding toward Silver Springs early this morning. Silver Springs? But why would he? Dahlia trailed off as understanding dawned. He's looking for information about me. People there know me. Most likely, Isaac agreed, but it also buys us time. Silver Springs is a day's ride from here. We need to get you back to the boarding house." As they hurried back, Dahlia's mind raced. He'll find out I was a teacher there. He might even discover where I'm from originally. "Let him," Isaac said firmly. "By the time he pieces it all together, we'll have you safely before that federal judge." But Dahlia wasn't convinced. She'd seen the cunning behind Victor's charming facade, experienced firsthand the ruthless determination that drove him. If he was gathering men, he wasn't planning to rely on legal channels to reclaim her. He was preparing for war. The next few days established a new routine for Dahlia. Mornings were spent helping Mrs. Reynolds with chores around the boarding house, cooking, cleaning, and minding young Ellie, who had taken an immediate liking to Dahlia. The domestic tasks were a welcome distraction, giving her hands purpose and her mind respite from constant worry. Afternoons, however, were dedicated to Isaac's promised lessons in self-defense. They met in a small clearing behind the Marshal's office, away from prying eyes. "The first thing to understand," Isaac explained during their initial session, "is that you don't need to overpower a man to escape him. You just need to surprise him enough to create an opportunity to get away." He showed her vulnerable points on the human body: eyes, throat, groin, places where even a woman's strength could inflict significant pain. He taught her how to break free from common holds and grabs, how to use an attacker's momentum against him. "Again," he would say whenever Dahlia failed to execute a move correctly, "your life may depend on this. Again." By the fourth day, Dahlia's muscles ached from the unfamiliar exertion, but she felt a growing confidence in her movements. When she successfully broke free from Isaac's grip and delivered a well-placed strike that made him grunt in surprise, the sense of accomplishment was unlike anything she'd experienced before. "Good," he said, rubbing his side where her elbow had connected. "That's exactly right." "I hurt you," Dahlia said, immediately concerned. "Better me than you," Isaac replied with a small smile. "And better you learn on me than try these moves for the first time in a real situation." As they took a break, sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree, Dahlia found herself studying Isaac's profile. Over these few days, she'd learned more about him: that he'd fought for the Union in the war, that he'd been a marshal for 6 years, moving from territory to territory as needed. He was 31, unmarried, and seemed to have few personal attachments beyond his duty. "Why did you become a marshal?" she asked suddenly. Isaac took a sip from his canteen before answering. "After my sister died, I found myself angry at a world that would allow such injustice. I could have channeled that anger in many directions, some less productive than others." His gaze was distant. "I decided that if I couldn't save her, I could perhaps prevent others from suffering the same fate." "Is that why you stepped in front of Victor that day?" Dahlia asked softly. "You saw me as another potential victim to save." Isaac turned to look at her fully. "At first, perhaps, but now—" He hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Now I see a woman of remarkable courage and determination, someone worth protecting for her own sake, not because of my past." The intensity in his eyes made Dahlia's breath catch. For a moment, neither spoke, the air between them charged with something undefined yet powerful. The moment was broken by the arrival of Deputy Sam Thornton, a lanky man with a weathered face and steady hands. "Marshal," he called, approaching the clearing. "Got news you'll want to hear." Isaac stood, helping Dahlia to her feet. "What is it, Sam?" "Ryder just came in from Silver Springs. Says Harmon and his boys tore through town yesterday, questioning everybody about Miss Locke here." Sam's expression was grim. Roughed up a few folks who weren't forthcoming enough for their liking. Dahlia felt sick. "Was anyone seriously hurt?" "Nobody killed, if that's what you're asking," Sam replied. but the schoolmaster took a bad beating. Seems he tried to defend your reputation when Harmon started spreading some unsavory stories. Mr. Jenkins, Dahlia whispered, thinking of the kind elderly man who had hired her to teach. He's nearly 70 years old. Harmon's trying to isolate you, Isaac said, his voice hard. Turn public opinion against you so no one will want to help. It gets worse, Sam continued. Word is they found out about Pyramid City. Harmon was heard saying he'd be paying a visit to our fair town very soon. Isaac's expression darkened. How many men with him? At least a dozen, from what our informant said. That's not a visit, Isaac said grimly. That's an invasion. Dahlia felt her newfound confidence draining away. This is my fault, she said. I'm bringing danger to innocent people. No, Isaac said firmly, gripping her shoulders. The only one at fault is Victor Harmon. Remember that. Turning to Sam, he continued, send telegrams to Carson City and Reno. Request additional lawmen if they can spare them, but I'm not counting on it. Then start organizing the men in town who can handle a weapon. Harmon may have numbers, but we'll have preparation and home ground. You're talking about a battle, Dahlia said, horrified. I'm talking about being ready for whatever comes, Isaac corrected. With luck, Harmon will see we're prepared and reconsider. Men like him prefer easy targets. But as they walked back to the boarding house, Dahlia couldn't shake her dread. She'd seen the obsession in Victor's eyes, the possessive rage that consumed him. He wouldn't be deterred by a show of force, it would only inflame him further. That evening, as Dahlia sat with Mrs. Reynolds and Ellie at the dinner table, the boarding house seemed unnaturally quiet. The other two boarders, a traveling salesman and an elderly widow, had departed earlier in the day, sensing the approaching trouble. Grandma says bad men are coming, Ellie announced suddenly, looking up from her plate, but Marshal Quinn will stop them. Mrs. Reynolds shot her granddaughter a warning look. Ellie, we talked about this. It's all right, Dahlia assured her, though her heart ached at the child's innocent faith in Isaac's abilities. Ellie, sometimes it's complicated when bad things happen. But yes, the Marshal and his deputies are very brave and will do everything they can to keep us safe. Are you going to marry the Marshal? Ellie asked with a child's directness. Tommy Wilkins says his pa says you two are sweet on each other. Eleanor, Mrs. Reynolds exclaimed, truly scandalized this time. That is not an appropriate question. Dahlia felt her cheeks flush. We're friends, Ellie. The Marshal is helping me because that's his job. But even as she said it, Dahlia knew it wasn't entirely true. There was something growing between her and Isaac, something that went beyond duty or obligation. She'd caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race, and she couldn't deny that she found herself thinking of him at odd moments throughout the day. After dinner, as Dahlia helped wash the dishes, Mrs. Reynolds spoke quietly. I don't mean to pry, but Ellie isn't wrong about the way the Marshal looks at you. I've only known him a few days, Dahlia protested weakly. Sometimes that's all it takes, the older woman replied, her eyes distant with memory. I knew my Henry was the one the very day I met him. 40 years together before God called him home, and I never doubted that first instinct. Dahlia didn't know how to respond. Her experience with Victor had left her wary of trusting her own judgment when it came to men. And yet, Isaac was so different, steady where Victor was volatile, principled where Victor was self-serving. Even if there was something there, Dahlia finally said, my situation makes it impossible. I'm still running for my life. All the more reason not to waste time denying your heart, Mrs. Reynolds said wisely. In this uncertain world, happiness should be grasped whenever it appears. Later that night, unable to sleep, Dahlia stood by her window watching the quiet street below. A nearly full moon illuminated the town in silver light, creating deep shadows between buildings. In one such shadow, she could make out the figure of Deputy Sam, making his rounds. The sound of footsteps on the back stairs startled her. Dahlia's heart hammered as she remembered Isaac's lessons, mentally preparing herself for confrontation. But it was Isaac himself who appeared at her door after a soft knock. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late," he said, his voice low, "but I needed to speak with you privately." Dahlia wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "Is it Victor? Has he arrived?" "No, not yet. But we expect him tomorrow or the day after at latest." Isaac's expression was troubled. "Dahlia, I've been thinking about our situation, about your safety." "Our situation," she repeated, noting the plural. Isaac looked momentarily flustered, an unusual break in his composure. "Yes, well, the town's situation. And yours." "And what have you concluded, Marshal?" Dahlia asked, unable to keep a small smile from her lips despite the gravity of the circumstances. "That staying here to face Harmon might be a mistake," he admitted. "I've arranged for a wagon to take you to Carson City at first light. You'll be escorted by 2 men I trust with my life. The federal judge is already there, and he's agreed to meet with you ahead of schedule." Dahlia stared at him, stunned by the sudden change of plans. "You want me to leave?" "To run again. I want you to be safe," Isaac insisted. "Harmon is coming with more men than we expected. I can't guarantee your protection if you stay." "And what about you?" Dahlia asked, a note of fear entering her voice. "What happens to you when Victor arrives and finds me gone?" "I'll handle Harmon. Like Mr. Jenkins tried to handle him." Dahlia shook her head vehemently. "No, I won't leave you and this town to face Victor's wrath because of me." "This isn't up for debate," Isaac said, his tone hardening. "As Marshal, I'm responsible for—" "Don't," Dahlia interrupted, suddenly angry. "Don't hide behind your badge, Isaac, not with me." For a moment he looked taken aback, then his shoulders slumped slightly. "I can't lose you," he admitted quietly. "The thought of Harmon getting his hands on you again, it keeps me awake at night." The raw honesty in his voice melted Dahlia's anger. She took a step closer to him. "And I can't bear the thought of you facing him alone because of me. Don't you see? That's what Victor wants, to isolate me, to make me feel that my only choice is to surrender to him to protect others." "Dahlia," Isaac began, but she pressed a finger to his lips. "I've been running for weeks," she said. "I'm tired of it. You've shown me that I can be stronger than my fear. Don't ask me to abandon that lesson now." Their eyes locked, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that transcended words. Slowly, deliberately, Isaac took her hand and pressed it against his heart. Dahlia could feel its steady, powerful beat beneath her palm. "I never expected you," he whispered. "Never thought I could feel this way again, or perhaps at all." "Isaac," Dahlia murmured, her own heart racing. He leaned down, his intention clear, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, Dahlia rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that started gently but quickly deepened with the intensity of feelings too long restrained. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Stay if you must," he said. "But promise me you'll remain in the boarding house when Harmon arrives. Let me deal with him." "I promise to be careful," Dahlia replied, which wasn't quite the same thing. "We'll face this together." As Isaac reluctantly took his leave, promising to return in the morning, Dahlia returned to her window. The town lay peaceful under the moonlight, but she knew it was the deceptive calm before a storm, one that would break all too soon. And when it did, she would be ready. Not just for her own sake, but for Isaac's, and for the future they might build together if they survived what was coming. Dawn broke hazy and hot over Pyramid City, the sun climbing into a cloudless sky that promised another scorching day. Dahlia had slept fitfully after Isaac's visit, her dreams a chaotic mix of fear and hope. She dressed carefully in her borrowed clothes, securing her hair in a practical bun. Today wasn't a day for vanity or pretense. Downstairs, she found Mrs. Reynolds already preparing breakfast, with Ellie setting the table. The domestic normalcy of the scene struck Dahlia as both precious and precarious. Marshal Quinn stopped by at first light, Mrs. Reynolds informed her. Said to tell you he's organizing men at the church. Father Martinez has offered it as a sanctuary if things escalate. The older woman's matter-of-fact tone belied the gravity of the situation. Pyramid City was preparing for a siege. What can I do to help? Dahlia asked. For now, eat your breakfast, Mrs. Reynolds replied firmly. No one fights well on an empty stomach. After the meal, Dahlia helped clean up, then went to the small parlor where Mrs. Reynolds kept her sewing basket. With deft movements born of years teaching children needlework, Dahlia began mending a tear in one of her borrowed dresses. The simple, repetitive motion was soothing, allowing her mind to drift. She thought of Isaac and the kiss they'd shared, a moment of connection and promise in the midst of danger. She thought of Victor and the man she'd once believed him to be, before the mask of charm had slipped to reveal the monster beneath. And she thought of herself, the proper Boston schoolteacher who had ventured west seeking independence, only to find herself trapped in a nightmare. Yet somehow, against all odds, she'd found courage she never knew she possessed. And perhaps, even more improbably, she'd found love. The sound of horses approaching drew Dahlia to the window. Deputy Sam was riding up to the boarding house, accompanied by a young man she didn't recognize. She met them at the door. Miss Locke, Sam greeted her, touching the brim of his hat. Marshal asked me to check on you and Mrs. Reynolds. This here is Billy Jenkins, our lookout from the church tower. The young man, scarcely more than 17, nodded respectfully. Madam, is there news? Dahlia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Sam exchanged a glance with Billy before answering. Dust cloud to the east. Riders coming, maybe a dozen like we expected. They'll be here by midday. Dahlia's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to remain calm. What are the marshal's instructions? He wants you and Mrs. Reynolds to take Ellie to the church now, Sam replied. Most of the town women and children are gathering there. It's the sturdiest building we have, and Father Martinez has laid in supplies in case. Well, in case things drag on. I'll get ready, Dahlia said, turning to call for Mrs. Reynolds. But before she could, Billy suddenly stiffened, his young face alarmed. Riders coming from the west too, he exclaimed. Fast, Sam cursed under his breath, drawing his pistol. Get inside, Miss Locke, now. Dahlia retreated into the house, her heart pounding. Through the window, she watched as Sam positioned himself on the porch, while Billy raced back toward the church to raise the alarm. The western riders approached rapidly, 5 men on lathered horses, pushing their mounts hard. They pulled up in front of the boarding house in a cloud of dust, and Dahlia's blood ran cold as she recognized the man in the lead. Victor Harmon sat tall in the saddle, as handsome and well-dressed as ever in his black coat and hat. His face, once so charming to her, now seemed like a mask covering something rotten beneath. I know she's in there, Deputy, Victor called, his voice carrying clearly through the window. Send Dahlia out and no one needs to get hurt. Can't do that, Mr. Harmon, Sam replied steadily. Marshal Quinn has extended his protection to Miss Locke. I suggest you and your men turn around and leave town peacefully. Victor laughed, the sound chilling in its lack of humor. You seem to be confused about the situation, Deputy. I have men approaching from the east, good men who are well paid and well armed. You're outnumbered. Be that as it may, Sam said, not moving from his position. You'll find Pyramid City isn't as easy to intimidate as Silver Springs. At the mention of Silver Springs, Victor's expression darkened. That old fool of a schoolmaster should have minded his own business, just like you should mind yours. Miss Locke is our business now, Sam replied. Marshal's orders. Victor's hand moved to his gun. Last chance, deputy, stand aside. Behind Dahlia, Mrs. Reynolds appeared with a shotgun in her hands. Get Ellie and go out the back, she whispered urgently. Head for the church. I'll cover Sam. I can't leave you, Dahlia protested. You can and you will, the older woman replied firmly. That man out there won't hesitate to hurt Ellie to get to you. Now go. The truth of her words struck Dahlia like a physical blow. She hurried to find Ellie, who was huddled fearfully in the kitchen. We need to go to the church, sweetheart, Dahlia explained, trying to keep her voice calm. It's like a game of hide and seek. We have to be very quiet and very fast. Can you do that? The little girl nodded solemnly, her eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. Dahlia took her hand and led her toward the back door. Just as they reached it, the sound of gunshots exploded from the front of the house. Run, Dahlia commanded, pushing the door open and pulling Ellie into the yard. They raced across the open space toward the back alley, Ellie's small legs pumping valiantly to keep up. More gunshots echoed behind them, followed by shouts and the crash of breaking glass. The alley offered some cover, and they followed it toward the center of town. Dahlia's heart hammered in her chest, her thoughts racing. Victor had outmaneuvered them, approaching from an unexpected direction while they focused on the eastern road. As they neared the end of the alley, Dahlia peered cautiously around the corner. The street appeared empty, most townsfolk having already taken refuge in their homes or the church. The church itself was visible 2 blocks away, its adobe walls promising safety. Ready, Ellie, Dahlia whispered. We're going to run as fast as we can to the church. Don't stop for anything. The child nodded, her small hand gripping Dahlia's tightly. They burst from the alley, racing across the open street. They had covered half the distance when the thunder of hooves made Dahlia's blood freeze. She glanced over her shoulder to see Victor and 2 of his men galloping toward them, having circled around the boarding house. There she is, Victor shouted, his voice carrying on the hot, still air. Keep running, Ellie, Dahlia urged, pushing the child ahead of her. Don't look back. The church was so close now, its heavy wooden doors standing open as Father Martinez ushered in the last of the townspeople seeking refuge. The priest spotted them and waved urgently. Hurry, he called. Behind them, Victor and his men were closing fast. Dahlia could hear the pounding hooves, feel the ground trembling beneath their impact. She made a split-second decision. Run to Father Martinez, Ellie, she instructed, giving the child a gentle push forward. I'll be right behind you. As Ellie sprinted the final distance to safety, Dahlia turned to face her pursuers. She wouldn't lead Victor to the church, to the women and children sheltering there. She wouldn't put more innocent lives at risk. Victor reined in his horse mere feet from where she stood, his men flanking him. His face was flushed with exertion and rage, his eyes glittering dangerously. There you are, darling, he said, his voice deceptively soft. You've led me on quite a chase. It's over, Victor, Dahlia replied, forcing strength into her voice despite her terror. I'm not coming back with you, not now, not ever. Victor's handsome features twisted with fury. You don't get to make that decision. You're mine, Dahlia. You always will be. No woman is property, Dahlia said, echoing Isaac's words from their first meeting. Not in this territory, not anywhere. Such brave words, Victor sneered, dismounting and approaching her. His men remained on horseback, watching the surroundings warily. But where is your protector now? That interfering Marshal who thinks he can steal what's mine. As if in answer to his question, a shot rang out, kicking up dust at Victor's feet. He froze, then slowly raised his hands. "Right here, Harmon," Isaac's voice called. Dahlia turned to see Isaac approaching steadily from the direction of the church, his revolver trained on Victor. Relief flooded through her, tempered immediately by fresh fear for his safety. "Marshal Quinn," Victor greeted him with false cordiality. "I believe you're interfering in a personal matter between me and my fiancé." "Former fiancé," Isaac corrected coolly. "And when you brought armed men into my town and started shooting, it became my matter." Victor's men shifted uneasily on their horses, hands hovering near their weapons. Isaac seemed unconcerned by their presence, his focus entirely on Victor. "I suggest you and your men leave Pyramid City," Isaac continued. "Miss Locke has made her wishes clear." Victor's face darkened. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Marshal. I own half the judges in Nevada territory. One word from me and your badge won't be worth the metal it's made from." "Maybe so," Isaac acknowledged. "But right now in this town, that badge gives me the authority to arrest you for assault, attempted kidnapping, and disturbing the peace. Your choice is simple: leave now or face charges." For a long, tense moment, Victor seemed to weigh his options. His eyes darted from Isaac to Dahlia, calculating. "This isn't over," he finally said, his voice low and menacing. "Not by a long shot." "For today it is," Isaac replied firmly. With a curt nod to his men, Victor remounted his horse. As he gathered the reins, he fixed Dahlia with a stare that made her shiver despite the heat. "I'll be seeing you again, darling," he promised. "Count on it." Then he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men following close behind. Only when they had disappeared from view did Isaac lower his weapon and hurry to Dahlia's side. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "No," she assured him, though her legs felt suddenly weak with the release of tension. "Mrs. Reynolds and Deputy Sam, they were at the boarding house when Victor arrived." "Sam's wounded but alive," Isaac told her. "Mrs. Reynolds is unharmed. She's quite a formidable woman with that shotgun of hers." Relief washed over Dahlia. "And Ellie, did she make it to the church?" "Safe with Father Martinez," Isaac confirmed. "Now we need to get you there too. Victor's other men will be arriving soon, and I don't trust this retreat. It was too easy." As they hurried toward the church, Dahlia explained what had happened at the boarding house. Isaac listened grimly. "Harmon split his forces," he concluded. "Smart. He kept us watching the eastern approach while he circled around with a smaller group." "What do we do now?" Dahlia asked. Isaac's expression was resolute. "We prepare for them to return. Victor Harmon isn't a man who accepts defeat." The church was crowded but orderly when they arrived. Father Martinez had organized the space efficiently, with water barrels, food supplies, and bedding arranged along the walls. Women comforted children, while a handful of armed men stood guard at the windows and doors. Mrs. Reynolds rushed to embrace Dahlia, Ellie clinging to her grandmother's skirts. "Thank God you're safe," the older woman said. "When I heard the shooting—" "I'm fine," Dahlia assured her. "How is Deputy Sam?" "Doc Wilson's tending to him in the vestry," Mrs. Reynolds replied. "Bullet went clean through his shoulder. He'll recover, but he won't be holding a gun anytime soon." Isaac excused himself to check on his deputy, leaving Dahlia with Mrs. Reynolds and Ellie. The little girl looked up at Dahlia with solemn eyes. "The bad man wanted to take you away," she said. It wasn't a question. Dahlia knelt to the child's level. "Yes, but Marshal Quinn stopped him. And now we're all safe here together." "Is he coming back?" Ellie asked, her perception uncomfortably acute. Before Dahlia could formulate a reassuring answer, Mrs. Reynolds intervened. "That's enough questions, Alina. Come help me organize these blankets." As the child was led away, Father Martinez approached Dahlia. The priest was a compact man with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh Nevada sun. "Miss Locke," he greeted her. "The Marshal has told me something of your situation. Please know that you are welcome in God's house for as long as necessary." "Thank you, Father," Dahlia replied gratefully. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your town." "Trouble finds its way to every door eventually," the priest said philosophically. "What matters is how we face it." He gestured around the church. "These people are stronger than they appear. Pyramid City has weathered drought, disease, and Indian raids. It will weather Victor Harmon." His quiet confidence was reassuring, though Dahlia couldn't entirely shake her fear. She found a quiet corner where she could watch the main doors, waiting anxiously for Isaac's return. When he finally emerged from the vestry, his expression was grim. He conferred briefly with several armed townsmen before making his way to Dahlia. "Sam will live," he reported, "but we're down to 6 men with any real experience with firearms. Father Martinez can shoot if needed, but he's a man of peace," Dahlia finished for him. Isaac nodded. "Harmon's eastern group has been spotted. They're making camp just outside town, at least 15 men well armed." "Why not attack immediately?" Dahlia wondered. "They are waiting for nightfall, most likely," Isaac replied, "or for reinforcements from Victor's smaller group. What's our plan?" Isaac raised an eyebrow at the hour but didn't correct her. "We hold the church. Its defensible thick walls, limited entrances, good visibility from the bell tower. We have water and supplies for several days if needed." "And then what?" Dahlia pressed. "We can't stay here indefinitely." "No," Isaac agreed. "But before Victor's men arrived, I sent Billy Jenkins riding for Carson City. If he made it through, we could have federal marshals here by tomorrow afternoon." "If," Dahlia repeated softly. Isaac took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I won't let Harmon take you," he promised. "Whatever happens." The intensity in his eyes stirred something deep within Dahlia. Despite the danger surrounding them, or perhaps because of it, she felt more alive, more present than she had in months. "Isaac," she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say, only knowing that time suddenly seemed precious and words inadequate. A commotion at the door interrupted the moment. One of the lookouts was calling for the marshal. Isaac squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "Stay here," he instructed, moving swiftly toward the disturbance. Dahlia watched as he conferred with the lookout, their expressions serious. After a brief discussion, Isaac returned. "Victor's sent a message," he explained. "He wants to meet just him and me to discuss terms." "Terms?" Dahlia repeated incredulously. "This isn't a negotiation." "In his mind it is," Isaac replied grimly. "And right now, with his men surrounding the town, he holds most of the cards." Fear clutched at Dahlia's heart. "You can't meet him, it's a trap." "Probably," Isaac acknowledged. "But refusing only delays the inevitable confrontation, and time is against us. The longer we're besieged here, the more desperate people will become." Dahlia looked around the church, noting the tired faces, the frightened children, the dwindling supplies. She understood Isaac's reasoning, but the thought of him facing Victor alone filled her with dread. "Then I'm coming with you," she declared. "Absolutely not," Isaac replied immediately. "Harmon wants you, that's the whole point of this. Bringing you to the meeting would be handing him exactly what he wants." "Or it could be our advantage," Dahlia countered. "Victor's obsessed with me. If I'm there, his focus will be divided. And—" She hesitated, then continued with determination, "and I need to face him, Isaac, for my own sake. I can't spend the rest of my life running from his shadow." Isaac studied her face, clearly conflicted. "It's too dangerous," he said, but his tone had softened. "Life is dangerous," Dahlia replied simply. "You taught me that I'm stronger than I believed." Let me prove it to Victor, to you, and to myself." After a long moment, Isaac nodded reluctantly. "We meet at sundown in the middle of the main street, open ground, visible from all sides." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across Pyramid City, Dahlia stood beside Isaac on the church steps. She had changed into the freshly mended dress, her hair neatly arranged. If she was to face Victor, she would do so with dignity. "Remember," Isaac said quietly, "stay behind me. If anything goes wrong, get back to the church as fast as you can. Father Martinez will bar the doors." Dahlia nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. The weight of what they were about to do, what she had insisted on doing, pressed heavily upon her. They walked slowly down the main street, which was eerily deserted. Windows were shuttered, doors barred. The only movement came from the occasional armed townsman watching from rooftops or alleyways. Isaac's meager forces positioned strategically throughout the small town. Victor was already waiting in the middle of the street, alone as agreed. He stood tall and confident, one hand resting casually on his gun belt. As they approached, his eyes fixed on Dahlia with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Marshal," Victor greeted Isaac coolly. "I see you've brought what belongs to me." "Miss Locke belongs to herself," Isaac replied evenly. "She's here because she chose to be." Victor's gaze never left Dahlia. "Is that what you've told yourself, darling? That you have a choice?" Dahlia stepped forward despite Isaac's warning hand. "I made my choice when I left your ranch, Victor. I chose freedom over fear." "And yet here you are, afraid," Victor observed, his voice softening to the persuasive tone she remembered from their courtship. "You don't need to be, you know. Come back with me now and I'll call off my men." "No one else needs to get hurt." "Like you hurt Mr. Jenkins?" Dahlia asked, anger rising to combat her fear. "Like you hurt Deputy Sam?" Victor shrugged dismissively. "Unfortunate necessities. They interfered in matters that didn't concern them." "That's where you're wrong," Isaac interjected. "When you threaten one citizen of this territory, you threaten all of us. The law exists to protect everyone, not just wealthy ranchers." Victor's charming facade slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "The law? Don't be naive, Marshal. The law is whatever men like me say it is." "Not in my town," Isaac replied firmly. "Your town," Victor repeated with a harsh laugh. "Look around you, Marshal. I have men on every approach, more guns than you can count. By dawn, Pyramid City could be ashes unless I get what I came for." He extended a hand toward Dahlia. "Come, darling. End this foolishness. You know where you belong." For a heartbeat, Dahlia remembered how it had felt in the beginning. Victor's attention, his flattery, the security he had seemed to offer a young woman alone in a harsh territory. But that memory was immediately overshadowed by darker ones. The first slap, the cruel words, the gradual isolation as he cut her off from friends and colleagues. "I know exactly where I belong," Dahlia said clearly. "And it's not with you, Victor. Not ever again." Victor's expression hardened. "Then you've made your choice and sealed the fate of everyone in this town." He turned to Isaac. "At dawn, Marshal. If she's not delivered to me by then, we attack. And I promise you it won't be quick or merciful." With that, he turned and walked away, his stride confident, unhurried. He knew he held the upper hand. "That went about as well as expected," Isaac said grimly as they watched Victor's retreating figure. "He's not bluffing," Dahlia said, her voice hollow. "He'll do exactly what he threatens." "I know," Isaac replied. "Come, we need to get back to the church." As they turned to retrace their steps, the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Isaac grunted in pain, staggering forward. Dahlia screamed as she saw blood spreading across his left side. "Ambush!" someone shouted from a nearby rooftop. More shots rang out as Victor's men, positioned in buildings along the street, opened fire. Isaac drew his revolver with his right hand, his left pressed against his bleeding side. "Run," he ordered Dahlia, pushing her toward the shelter of a nearby alley. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as the townsmen returned fire from their positions. Caught in the crossfire, Dahlia and Isaac stumbled into the narrow alley, pressing against the wall for cover. "You're hurt," Dahlia said, her hands shaking as she reached for his wound. "Not badly," Isaac grimaced, though his pale face belied his words. "The bullet grazed my ribs. I can still move." From the street came shouts and more gunfire as the skirmish continued. Victor had clearly never intended to honor the peaceful meeting. It had been a setup from the start. "We need to get to the church," Isaac said, peering cautiously around the corner. "It's our only chance." But the route back to the church was now under heavy fire, the street between becoming a deadly gauntlet. They were trapped. "There's another way," Dahlia said suddenly, remembering the town layout from her walks with Isaac. "Behind the general store there's an alley that leads to the back of the church." Isaac nodded, wincing at the movement. "Lead on." They moved deeper into the alley, away from the main street. The sounds of gunfire grew more distant as they navigated the narrow passages between buildings. Isaac's breathing was labored, his steps increasingly unsteady. "Just a little further," Dahlia encouraged, supporting as much of his weight as she could. They had almost reached the back of the general store when a figure stepped into their path. Victor stood before them, his gun drawn, his face a mask of cold fury. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate your every move?" he asked softly. "I've had men watching your daily walks, learning your patterns, Marshal. I know this town better than you think." Isaac tried to raise his revolver, but Victor was faster. He fired once, the bullet striking Isaac in the leg. The Marshal collapsed with a cry of pain, his gun clattering to the ground. "No!" Dahlia screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. Victor approached calmly, keeping his weapon trained on Isaac. "Now then, darling, your protector can't help you anymore. It's time to end this game." "Go to hell, Harmon," Isaac growled through gritted teeth, trying unsuccessfully to reach his fallen gun. "After you, Marshal," Victor replied, taking aim again. In that moment, something snapped within Dahlia. The fear that had been her constant companion for weeks transformed into a cold, clear rage. As Victor focused on Isaac, she remembered her training, the vulnerable points, the element of surprise. With a cry that contained all her pent-up terror and fury, Dahlia launched herself at Victor, driving her knee hard into his groin. As he doubled over in shock and pain, she brought her elbow down on the back of his neck, just as Isaac had taught her. Victor staggered, his shot going wide. His gun fell from his hand as he tried to recover his balance. Dahlia dove for it, her fingers closing around the grip. Victor straightened, his handsome face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You bitch," he snarled, lunging for her. Dahlia raised the gun, her hands surprisingly steady. "Not another step, Victor." He froze, his eyes fixed on the weapon pointed at his chest. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his features. "You won't shoot me," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't have it in you." "You have no idea what I have in me," Dahlia replied, her voice steady. "You never did. You saw what you wanted to see, a proper Boston school teacher you could control and possess, but I am so much more than that." From the ground, Isaac had managed to retrieve his revolver. He aimed it at Victor, his hand shaking slightly from pain and blood loss. "It's over, Harmon," he said. "Your men are being driven back. Billy Jenkins got through to Carson City. Federal marshals are on their way. You've lost." As if to confirm his words, the sound of gunfire in the distance was diminishing, replaced by shouts of victory from the townsmen. Victor looked from Dahlia to Isaac, calculating his odds. His confident facade crumbled, revealing the coward beneath. "You're making a mistake, Dahlia," he said, his tone shifting to the persuasive charm she once found so appealing. "We could still work this out, you and I. I'd forgive you for this." Momentary lapse in judgment. Dahlia's laugh was bitter. "Forgive me? You should be begging my forgiveness, Victor. For every bruise, every threat, every moment of terror you caused me. You're nothing without me," he hissed, his true nature emerging once more. "A spinster schoolteacher with no family, no connections. Who will want you now?" "I will," Isaac said simply, his blue eyes meeting Dahlia's. "I do." The words hung in the air between them, a promise amidst the chaos. In that moment of distraction, Victor made his move. He lunged forward, attempting to wrest the gun from Dahlia's grip. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously. Victor staggered backward, blood blossoming on his chest from 2 wounds, one from Dahlia's gun, one from Isaac's. He looked down at the spreading stain with an expression of utter disbelief. "You shot me," he said to Dahlia, his voice faint with shock. "You gave me no choice," she replied, her hands finally beginning to shake as the reality of what she had done sank in. Victor took another step backward, then collapsed to the ground. His eyes remained open, staring sightlessly at the darkening sky above. Dahlia lowered the gun slowly, her entire body trembling now. The weapon fell from her nerveless fingers as she turned to Isaac, who had pulled himself to a sitting position against the wall of the alley. "Isaac," she whispered, kneeling beside him, "we need to get you to Doc Wilson." "In a minute," he replied, his face pale but determined. "Did you mean what you said earlier, about being done running?" Dahlia's eyes filled with tears not of fear or grief but of release. "Yes," she said. "I'm done running. I want to stay if I'm welcome here." Isaac reached up to touch her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "You're more than welcome, Dahlia Locke. You're needed, by this town, and especially by me." As the last light of day faded from the sky above Pyramid City, Dahlia leaned down to kiss Isaac Quinn, a kiss of promise, of beginning, of a future neither of them had dared to imagine until now. 4 months later, on a crisp December morning in 1873, Dahlia stood before the mirror in Mrs. Reynolds' best guest room, hardly recognizing her own reflection. The woman who gazed back at her wore a simple but elegant cream-colored dress, her dark hair arranged with sprigs of winter holly. Her eyes, once shadowed with fear, now shone with quiet joy. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Reynolds declared, adjusting the small veil that would soon be pinned to Dahlia's hair. "Marshal Quinn won't know what hit him," Dahlia smiled, smoothing the fabric of her wedding dress. "I still can hardly believe this is happening." "Believe it," Mrs. Reynolds said firmly. "You've earned this happiness, both of you." The past 4 months had been a time of healing and transformation. After Victor's death, his men had scattered, their loyalty extending only as far as his money. The federal marshals had arrived the following day to find Pyramid City battered but unbowed, its citizens already beginning the work of repair. Isaac's wounds had healed slowly but completely under Doc Wilson's care and Dahlia's attentive nursing. During his recovery, they had grown closer, their love deepening from the intense connection forged in danger to something more lasting and profound. Pyramid City had changed too. With Victor's threat removed, the town had flourished. New families had arrived, drawn by tales of the brave Marshal and townspeople who had stood against a tyrant. The school had reopened with Dahlia as its teacher. And Isaac, though still serving as Marshal, had begun talking of eventually passing the badge to Deputy Sam, now fully recovered, to focus on building something more enduring: a home, a family. A knock at the door interrupted Dahlia's reflections. Ellie peeked in, resplendent in her role as flower girl. "Grandma, everyone's waiting," she announced importantly. "Father Martinez says it's time." Mrs. Reynolds nodded, pinning the veil in place with a final adjustment. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Perfect." As they made their way to the church, the same church that had sheltered them during the siege, Dahlia felt a profound sense of rightness. The town was decorated for both Christmas and the wedding, with evergreen boughs and red ribbons adorning buildings along the main street. Townsfolk nodded and smiled as she passed, no longer viewing her as an outsider bringing trouble, but as one of their own. The church was filled to capacity, its simple interior transformed by candlelight and flowers. Deputy Sam, serving as best man, stood beside Isaac at the altar. And Isaac watched her approach with such love in his eyes that Dahlia felt her heart might burst with happiness. As Father Martinez began the ceremony, Dahlia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west seeking independence and found instead a different kind of freedom, the freedom to love and be loved, to belong to a community, to build a future unshackled by fear. When the time came to speak their vows, Isaac's voice was steady and sure. "I, Isaac Quinn, take you, Dahlia Locke, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you not because you're weak, but because you're precious to me. To respect your strength and courage which humbles me daily. To stand beside you, not between you and the world. And to love you all the days of my life." Tears blurred Dahlia's vision as she responded with her own vows. "I, Dahlia Locke, take you, Isaac Quinn, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to trust you with my heart, knowing it's safe in your keeping. To face whatever comes with the courage you've helped me find. To build a home and a life with you that knows no fear, only love. And to cherish you all the days of my life." The simple gold bands they exchanged held more meaning than the elaborate engagement ring Victor had once placed on her finger, a symbol not of possession but of partnership, freely given and joyfully received. "By the authority vested in me," Father Martinez concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The kiss they shared was both a seal on their vows and a promise of the life to come, as they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Quinn. The church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration continued well into the evening at the newly expanded Pyramid City Hotel, with music, dancing, and more food than the small town had seen in years. Dahlia and Isaac moved among their friends and neighbors, accepting congratulations and well wishes with genuine gratitude. As the night drew to a close, Isaac led Dahlia onto the small balcony overlooking the main street. The winter air was cold and crisp, the sky above ablaze with stars. "Happy Mrs. Quinn?" he asked, drawing her into the warmth of his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible," Dahlia replied, resting her head against his chest. "A year ago I couldn't have imagined this life." "Neither could I," Isaac admitted, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For a long time after my sister died, I thought my purpose was just to uphold the law to protect others because I couldn't protect her. I never expected to find someone who would make me want more." Dahlia lifted her face to his. "And now?" "Now," Isaac said, his blue eyes reflecting the starlight, "I think my sister would be proud. Not just because I helped you, but because I was finally brave enough to let someone help me too." "To new beginnings," Dahlia murmured, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "And happy endings," Isaac added when they parted, his smile tender in the moonlight. As they returned to the celebration, hand in hand, Dahlia knew that their story was neither beginning nor ending, but continuing a shared journey of love, courage, and hope in the wild land. they both now called home. 2 years later, Dahlia sat on the porch of their home at the edge of Pyramid City, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The house was modest but solid, 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and the wide porch where Isaac had insisted on putting 2 rocking chairs for when we're old and gray. The sound of laughter drew her attention to the yard, where Isaac was teaching their 10-month-old son, Thomas, to take his first tentative steps. The baby's face was a perfect blend of his parents' Dahlia's dark hair and Isaac's blue eyes, already showing the determined expression that characterized both his mother and father. "Come on, little man," Isaac encouraged, kneeling with his arms outstretched. "Come to Pa." Thomas wobbled precariously, then took 3 decisive steps before plopping down on his well-padded bottom. His surprised expression was so comical that both parents burst into laughter. "He's going to be running before we know it," Dahlia observed as Isaac scooped up their son and carried him to the porch. "Takes after his mother," Isaac replied with a grin. "Always moving forward, never looking back." Life in Pyramid City had settled into a peaceful rhythm since their wedding. Isaac had indeed passed the Marshal's badge to Sam Thornton 6 months ago, turning his attention instead to the small ranch he'd established outside town. Dahlia continued teaching at the school, bringing Thomas with her until he was old enough for Mrs. Reynolds to watch during the day. The town itself had grown, benefiting from a new silver strike in the nearby mountains. New buildings had sprung up, including a proper hotel and a bank. The church had been expanded to accommodate the growing congregation, and Father Martinez had finally received the assistance he'd been requesting for years, a young priest from San Francisco who brought fresh energy to the mission work among the Paiute. "Letter came today," Isaac said, settling into the rocking chair beside Dahlia's. Thomas perched contentedly on his lap. "From your friend in Boston, Elizabeth, was it?" Dahlia nodded, taking the envelope he offered. "She was my dearest friend at the teaching college. I've been trying to convince her to visit for months." Opening the letter, Dahlia scanned its contents, her expression brightening. "She's coming. In the spring. She says she's curious to see the Wild West that's tamed both a notorious rancher and a confirmed bachelor marshal." Isaac chuckled. "Hardly tamed," he said, bouncing Thomas on his knee. "Just redirected our energies to more worthwhile pursuits." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas began to fuss, his small face scrunching in preparation for what they both recognized as his hungry cry. "I'll put him to bed after he eats," Dahlia said, taking their son into her arms. "Will you check on the horses before coming in?" Isaac nodded, rising to drop a kiss on her forehead. "Don't fall asleep without me," he murmured, his voice holding the same warmth that still made her heart beat faster after 2 years of marriage. Later, with Thomas fed and sleeping peacefully in his crib, Dahlia stood at the bedroom window, gazing at the star-filled desert sky. She could see Isaac in the small stable, tending to their horses by lantern light, his movements efficient and gentle. A sense of profound gratitude washed over her. The journey that had brought her here had been marked by terror and violence, yet it had led to this quiet, perfect happiness. Victor Harmon's shadow had long since faded from her life, though occasionally she still woke from nightmares in which she was running, pursued by an unseen threat. On those nights, Isaac would hold her close, his steady heartbeat anchoring her to the present until the fear subsided. "You're safe," he would whisper. "You're home." And she was, not just in this house or in Pyramid City, but in the life they had built together, a life founded on mutual respect, shared dreams, and a love that had been forged in fire but now burned with a steady, enduring flame. When Isaac returned to the house, securing the door behind him, Dahlia was waiting. He crossed to her, drawing her into his arms with the familiar ease of long practice. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "About how far we've come," she replied honestly. "About that day when you stood between Victor and me and said not any more." Isaac's expression softened with memory. "Best decision I ever made, stepping into that street." "For both of us," Dahlia agreed, rising to meet his kiss, a kiss that still held the promise of their first, yet was deepened by all they had experienced together since. Outside, the desert night wrapped around their home like a protective blanket. Stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of time in their eternal dance. And within those walls, two people who had found each other against all odds continued writing their story, not one of fleeing and pursuit, but of standing firm together, facing whatever life might bring with courage, hope, and abiding love.